Hey, what's happening, everybody? Christopher Ohms here. Today we're going to look at a coil that is probably my current favorite coil. It's a favorite build. I use it in everything. It's in this. It's in, I don't know, yeah, at least two or three of my RDAs that I put on my, both in series or just an RDA or tanks. And that's a ssfc variant, staggered staple fuse Clapton. That's what ssfc means. The variant part that I'm going to do today is the staple. I don't ribbon wire makes up staple, and I don't care for ribbon wire at all. I don't like the way it vapes, and I definitely don't like working with it. Yes, I've used it. Yes, I've built several decent coils with it. It's just not my favorite thing. So I looked for a different way to keep the coil similar, stay true to kind of the idea of the coil, but make it easier to work with. I love making coils easier for people to build, and I think it's a better vape. I use square wire, and I just think it's a better vape. Okay, that being said, so when you look at this coil, you might think, well, your channel is like kind of for beginners and intermediate builders, and more towards beginners. And I believe if you can make a single fuse Clapton, you can do this build the way I'm going to do it today. If you can make your staggered frames by forced Claptoning, and I've got a video about it, you can do this build. So there's that. I have already done my frames because they take time. They do take a little bit of time to make. And you guys, I mean, you've seen me do it 3 or 4 times now, so I'm not going to make you watch it again. So I've made my frames already. That's going to be enough for 2 coils. And I've got my square wire cut. I'm using 2 pieces of 0.3 by 0.3 millimeter square wire with 28 gauge frames. If you have Vape Tool Pro, if you look when you're calculating your coils out, you'll see when you choose what gauge wire it is, that right next to it there's a point number millimeter. Like, so if you're using a 26 gauge piece of round wire, you'll look over and it'll say 0.4 millimeters. That's the wire mass. Okay? Square wire is just the same thing, square. So 26 gauge square wire would work out to 0.4 millimeter by 0.4 millimeter square wire. Today I'm using 28 gauge, so it's 0.3 millimeter by 0.3 millimeter square wire. I'm using 2 pieces of that for 2 cores. I'm building these for a friend of mine, Michael Henderson, to try, because as far as I know, he hasn't tried them yet. So, and I think he's gonna like them a lot. So again, no matter your skill level here, you should be able to build this build, and I think it's an amazing coil. And everybody that has tried the ones I build agrees with me. So let's get to it. Okay, the wire I used, 28 gauge round wire. I used 38 gauge for my staggers, for my staggered frames, and I staggered that with 36 gauge, meaning that's the second part of my forced Clapton that I ran through. I created the stagger with 36 gauge versus 38 gauge. Just makes those staggers a little bigger, so that 38 falls in a little nicer. And of course, square wire, 0.3 millimeter by 0.3 millimeter. Special tool, if you have them, nylon pliers. If you don't, you can use your toothless pliers. And quite frankly, I use my toothless pliers more than my nylon anyway. You just have to be careful. Okay, so let's get going here. So I'm gonna do my cores first, because the way I build things is it seems basic to me. It seems pretty easy to me. So that's how I do it. Okay, so got the ends flush. When you grab the two pieces of square wire, they're gonna parallel naturally. It's really, it just happens. Bend that over, keep it parallel, and I'm gonna go ahead and put that in my drill side swivel and crimp it just like I always do. Then I'm gonna run my fingers down until I get to the end, square up the swivel side end. Same thing, just fold it over. And slip it into your swivel side swivel. Boy, I was a bad builder. I left wires in my swivels. Let me get rid of these wires. These are just wires from building last night that apparently I said I'm not going to mess with that right now. Which is like me. I do that quite often. Okay, good. You can see what I'm doing here. Now, at this point, what you're going to want to do, because it takes a little bit of time to fuse these, to actually do the thinnest fused wire, the 38 gauge fuse. It takes some time, and I find that my arm holding my drill, my left arm, it starts pulling tighter and tighter and tighter, trying to keep my cores tight. So I don't want it to pull out of my swivel side swivel. So I'm just going to take a chunk of 36 gauge wire and wrap around my bend. So basically I'm just going to be wrapping around just down here to keep those core wires from pulling out of the swivel. You don't have to do much. Half a dozen wraps around there will keep it. Cut the excess off because it's annoying. Alrighty then. So now we are to the drill side swivel. Now, I'm trying to get the parallel wires, the core wires, to be flat like that. It's probably just silliness, but I always do it. I think it makes it easier to attach my frames. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my 38 gauge fuse wire. Goose Creations. Go Goose. And I'm going to pull a little bit, about a foot, off the spool and let it sit there. So I can reach it, so I can grab it, so I can put my hands on it. Then I'm going to grab my frames. Again, they're just staggered frames, 28 gauge staggered. I did one piece and folded in half. Okay, I'm just going to set this on the build and see, having it folded in half, it sits there. To me, and it's probably just a mental thing, to me it makes it easier to get your frames attached to your cores so you can start building. So I'm really close right there. So I'm just crimping it together, frames and cores all parallel, as close together as I can get them, with my fingers. Just crimp it together. Find your end of your wire, your 38 gauge fuse. And like the man said, wrap it up. Just make sure it's kind of staying parallel. Everything's staying parallel. So you got 4 wires flat across the top of your build. Put a couple wraps on and grab your toothless pliers and crimp it. Then add some more. It's hard to think of shit to say while I'm just doing something. So, hey, crimp it again. Now, that's probably pretty good. Cut off the excess because we're gonna wrap some more around it. Now that I have it fastened to the cores, now that I have the frames fastened to the cores, I'm gonna mechanically fasten some more. So I'm gonna do some more wraps with the drill. You don't want to be on high speed with this build. You want to keep everything low speed. So I'm just going to kind of fuse some more around the build. And you want to be gentle with this. You don't want to go high speed and go crazy. And crimp that stuff. Sorry, my initial, when I first started using the drill, I didn't incorporate the cores where I bent the cores over and stuck them to my swivel. I didn't wrap around that, so it doesn't come out either, so I had to go back and do that. Okay, so now we are at a great spot to start fusing this. Which is what I'm about to do. The trick of it is I can't see it. So I got to use some kind of magnification for vision. There are builders out there that do this without magnification, and I'm not one of them. I'm blind. So all I have here is basically a jeweler's loop and a pair of eyeglass frames. So I just wrap it around my head and look through it. Now, if everything's good, this should really, once you get to the position where your lead wire needs to be, it should just stagger right along for a bit. And I'll tell you what happened here in a second. But I'm going to stagger some. Okay, and see, we're going good. So we got nice frames. Our frames came out nice. The staggers are working. Now, somewhere between 1/8 of an inch of fuse and 1/4 inch of fuse, you're going to start noticing that your frames are going to twist around your cores. That's when you're going to want to stop and crimp your fuse wire into the build, into the staggers. Secure it so it really doesn't move all that much. Now, here's the thing. Right now, my build is flat. So my staggers are like this, or my cores are like this, off of the swivel. So my lead wire, I'm going to pull it and get it in line with that too before I crimp, because you'll break the wire, you'll bend the wire. Breaking the wire, you got to start over. If you bend the wire, it just leaves a crappy fuse, a bent up fuse in this beautiful coil that you just built. So you just got to be a little bit careful when you're crimping. Now, I want to stagger just a bit more so I can show you guys the last little step I do. Okay, and here's the thing. Another thing. Your fuse wire, your 38 gauge or 36 gauge or whatever you're gonna build these with, you want to hold that with a light hand. You don't want a whole lot of tension on your lead wire. Just enough tension to get it seating in those staggers well. Here's the thing. These builds twist. It just happens. All you have to do is untwist them at the end. The big important parts are getting your staggers and not missing any spaces, and just creating a really nice, tight, pretty fuse. As it starts going, you're going to start seeing it, and you'll start liking it. You'll start noticing that those dual core square wires, they're flat, but you can see them, and it looks cool. Now, if I was to continue this fusing, I'm going to say probably about a third of the way through, it would start fucking up. It would get tight. The staggers would get tight. I would have to start angling my lead wire, my fuse wire, to get into the staggers. And it would start looking horrible, missing staggers. It would just be bad. About a third of the way, I would think. The reason that is because I did fold my stagger frames in half. Each time you wrap that fuse wire through those staggers, the staggers move. The staggers that you're not wrapping move forward towards your swivel. And if it's bent like this, they have nowhere to go. So they just start backing up to each other and coming back on you. So the gaps close up. You don't want that. Totally simple thing. Just make sure you're staggered 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch in good solid staggers, so you know that your build is set up and supported and it's not going anywhere. Stop, just cut the end. Literally snip those ends and you cut the bend, and now you have these. See how they're open-ended now? That's it. That's all you have to do. And now the wire, the staggers, your fuse wires, have plenty of room to go anywhere they want. Now, if you're staggering along and you're all happy and giddy and woohoo, I'm doing this, and it starts screwing up on you, just check the end. Make sure that the staggers can come off at the end. Be very gentle about it because you don't want to mess your staggers up, but just make sure it's not backing up. You know how when you decor for aliens, sometimes the damn thing won't come off and it's because the cut's bad? That happens here too. So just make sure you have room, stagger that bad boy up, and you're done. That's it. That is my variation of the stagger staple fuse Clapton, which I refer to, because I still use ssfc, staggered solid core fuse Clapton. And I think you like it. I know it's easier than stacking ribbon, because stacking ribbon is tough for me anyway. So check it out. If you like it, cool. If you didn't, that's cool too. Thanks for watching anyway. I appreciate everybody that does watch, and if you have any comments or questions, leave them below. If you want to get directly a hold of me, Christopher Ohms on Facebook and Messenger. Maybe I'll put a link in the comments. I think I can figure out how to do that. Anyway, thanks a lot for watching, guys. Peace.